Hello, and welcome to History Inquirer. This is where we inquire into the past to understand our present. Today's inquiry will focus on the Philadelphia Campaign of the American Revolution in 1777. The questions that I'll be trying to answer are: why did General Howe abandon General Burgoyne for Philadelphia? What were the major battles? What impact did this have on American history and the key players? So sit back, relax, and grab a drink as I tell you the story of the Philadelphia Campaign of 1777. Now, if you watched my last video on the Battle of Saratoga, then you would already know the background to this. However, for those that did not, I will sum up. For the campaign season of 1777, the British leadership decided to cut New England off from the rest of the colonies by having Major General John Burgoyne march south from Canada. Brigadier General Barry St. Leger marched east from Oswego, and Lieutenant General William Howe marched north from New York City to meet up in Albany together. It was in Albany, New York, that the northern part of the Continental Army was located, or at least in the vicinity. The plan failed, and Burgoyne was forced to surrender to General Horatio Gates following the Battle of Saratoga. The loss was partly due to General William Howe having his own plan to march on Philadelphia, which was approved by British leadership, although they expected him to do both. Doing both plans would require General Howe to move much quicker than he actually did, and some historians believe that he could have taken Philadelphia quickly and then returned north to join Burgoyne. But that was not to be, as Howe was later focused on drawing Washington's army out and defeating him by threatening Philadelphia, capturing the city, and Congress. The other part of it was that Burgoyne was Howe's rival, and that the glory for victory at Saratoga would largely go to Burgoyne and not Howe. This then begs the question, why was he so focused on Washington, other than the fact that Washington was commander-in-chief of the American forces? The answer to this lies in the fact that during the past year, Washington and Howe had been going at it constantly. Every time that Howe thought he had finally defeated Washington's army, Washington managed to slip away. Not only that, but the army that he thought was thoroughly defeated crossed the Delaware River and won at Trenton and Princeton, which must have felt like an insult. It must have been frustrating for him. He wanted the glory of taking the rebel capital and finishing off Washington. Yet, for all that, General Howe was in no hurry and proceeded to move his troops by sea with his brother's ships, Admiral Richard Howe. Now, it might have been faster to go across New Jersey, but he decided to go by ship. Anyways, the original plan was to sail up the Delaware River to Philadelphia, but because of the American defenses, the British sailed up the Chesapeake Bay instead and landed in northern Maryland near the mouth of the Elk River, near what is now Elkton, Maryland. As the British began their march from Philadelphia, Washington moved his army south through Philadelphia to meet them at Brandywine Creek, which the British would have to cross to reach their objective of Philadelphia. Brandywine Creek sits just 25 miles southeast of Philadelphia, about 150 feet wide, with high bluffs on either side. The British troops would be very vulnerable while crossing, as they were at Assunpink Creek, New Jersey. No, what the British needed was to find another ford to get their forces across so they could flank Washington's forces. Now, a loyalist from Philadelphia named Joseph Galloway told General Howe about which fords were unguarded. So General Howe ordered General Wilhelm von Knyphausen to keep Washington's attention while the rest of his force under General Cornwallis moved northward to cross the Brandywine and attack Washington's right flank. Although Washington learned of the British flanking maneuver and moved troops in position to counter the threat, his men were soon overrun, outnumbered, and exposed with no time to fortify their position. The American forces under General Sullivan, defending the right flank, fought valiantly and reinforced by General Nathanael Greene, but it was too little too late, and they were forced to retreat. At the same time, the British forces under General von Knyphausen charged Washington's center, which had been weakened, to face the British on the American right flank. Thus, the center of Washington's army collapsed, and he was forced to order the retreat, with General Nathanael Greene commanding the rear guard, preventing the destruction of Washington's army. The Marquis de Lafayette was wounded in the fight, yet he was able to assist in organizing the retreat as night began to fall. So even though the British won the battle, they were unable to destroy Washington's army. Since General Washington did not want to hand over the city of Philadelphia without a fight, he positioned his army in the path of the British. However, he also wanted to avoid a major confrontation and lose his army. So it became a game of cat and mouse. Now, on September 16th, near White Horse Tavern, the American and British forces became engaged in what is now called the Battle of the Clouds. Washington and his men, 10,000 of them, were on the high ground and prepared to meet General William Howe's 15,000 men. The two forces skirmished initially and were preparing for a major conflict when the sky opened and a torrential downpour ensued, soaking everything, including the gunpowder. The battlefield was now a muddy mess. Washington ordered them to retreat northward, leaving General William Howe free to not only enter Philadelphia, but also Valley Forge, where, as historian Woody Holton writes in his book, The Liberty is Sweet, the rebels had stashed 25 barrels of horseshoes, several thousand tomahawks, 3,800 barrels of flour, and other supplies. General Anthony Wayne and the 1,500 men under his command stayed in the area to raid the British supplies. The Americans made camp near Pally Tavern, not far from the British camp. As historian Woody Holton writes in Liberty is Sweet, at 1 a.m. on September 21st, General Charles Gray and 5,000 redcoats crept into Wayne's camp in what survivors called the Pally Massacre. They killed, wounded, or captured nearly 300 Continentals. Gray boasted that his soldiers, only 2 or 3 of them were killed, had executed the entire raid with bayonets, not firing a single shot because he had forbade them to carry flints. Following this, General Howe took Philadelphia and left 3,000 men to garrison the city, while he sent 9,000 men to occupy Germantown, Pennsylvania, as he feared getting trapped in the city. Washington saw an opportunity for an offensive, and with an additional 4,000 reinforcements, prepared a surprise attack. However, the weather intervened, and a thick fog rose up, causing confusion among the American forces. And as Willie Hilton says, some of them actually fired on each other and gave the British time to prepare a counterattack. The Americans were forced to retreat and make camp at Valley Forge for the winter after engaging the British in a set of skirmishes called the Battle of White Marsh, which ended inconclusively after General Howe ordered his troops back to Philadelphia after engaging Washington's forces like 3 times. And he ordered the retreat on December 8th. The British also succeeded in taking Fort Mifflin and Fort Mercer, which guarded the entrance to Philadelphia on the Delaware River side, though they were fiercely defended. One of the American regiments defending Fort Mercer was the 1st Rhode Island, which was the first majority black regiment in American history. As the year of 1777 drew to a close, the Americans and British settled into winter quarters, with the Americans in Valley Forge and the British in Philadelphia. Although General Howe succeeded in taking Philadelphia, he failed in destroying Washington's army and in capturing Congress, which had fled to York, Pennsylvania. The reason they were able to flee the city was because General Washington and his army were able to block the British and buy time for Congress and the Patriots to escape. The capture of Philadelphia failed to have the psychological demoralizing impact that General Howe wanted to have. And part of the reason for that is because the colonies were used to governing themselves independently for so long. And he also failed to support General Burgoyne at Saratoga, which led to the French entering the war on the American side, which tipped the scales in America's favor and led to the American victory at Yorktown in 1781 and the Treaty of Paris in 1783. General Howe, in frustration at his failures, would resign his command and return to Britain in April 1778, and General Henry Clinton would take his place. Now, General Howe actually submitted his resignation in October of 1777, but he wouldn't leave Philadelphia until April 1778. Okay. Now, Philadelphia would be returned to the Americans, with the British leaving for New York through New Jersey, where they would engage Washington's army at the Battle of Monmouth in June 1778. Or rather, Washington's forces would engage them. Anyways, that was in June 1778. But that is a story for another time, another video. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next time on the History Inquirer. Thank you.